ES Audio.
I'm Nick Clark.
I'm Nancy Durrant.
And I'm Nick Curtis. Coming up on today's show, we'll be reviewing Stephen Sondheim's old friends at the Gielgud Theatre.
On a plate, start here, start now. Honey, everything's coming up roses.
That stars Lea Salonga and Bonnie Langford, and making her West End debut, Broadway legend Bernadette Peters.
For our second review, it's Close Up, the Twiggy Musical. That's written and directed by Ben Elton and is now on at the Many a Chocolate Factory.
And we'll be joined by Conversations with Friends star Alison Oliver.
I went to stage schools and stuff like that in Cork when I was a kid and just loved the stage so much and, live theatre. And I graduated college during the pandemic, so theatre was kind of quiet when I was graduating, and that's always been my dream, is to be on stage.
Alison is starring as Portia in Portia Coughlan at the Almeida Theatre.
Hello, welcome back to the Evening Standard Theatre podcast. Nick Curtis, I will let you kick off with the big news of the week.
Yeah, well, the big news for us this week, and if you have not spotted it online yet, is that the 67th Evening Standard Theatre Awards have been announced. Woo-hoo. It's going to happen, folks. They're coming back bigger than last year, as that was their first year post-COVID. It was a relatively small one then, for obvious reasons. This year, the ceremony will be hosted by the newspaper's proprietor, Lord Lebedev, with the help of co-host David Harewood, Vanessa Kirby, Sienna Miller, and no less than Sir Ian McKellen, alumnus of this podcast.
Indeed.
And it'll be presented by the brilliant Susan Wokoma.
Oh, she's so great.
That is some lineup.
It's going to be really cool.
It's a pretty good lineup. I mean, just delighted to see these names. David Harewood, I've interviewed a number of times over the years. Vanessa Kirby, I did one of the first interviews she ever did, I think, when she was in Three Sisters at the Young Vic a million years ago. And it's just amazing what huge stars these people are now, turning out to support the theatre, that nurtured them.
I know, it's so exciting. Last year would have been my first because I joined just pre-COVID, and the date moved and I was at a wedding, so I couldn't go. So this is actually going to be my first ever proper Evening Standard Theatre Awards.
It's going to be...
my dress dry cleaned. My dress, the only dress.
You're going to have a blast. Stephen Daldry once said to me he always loved these theatre awards because they felt like the sort of starting gun for the party season.
Yeah, nice.
It's all sort of downhill to Christmas from here, really. So
when that drunk from that night,
exactly
from
that night onwards,
continuously until.
Well, that is the high point, isn't it? It is only downhill from there.
It is. I can't obviously reveal the shortlist of the awards because we're going to be choosing the winners next week. But it's good. It's a really good year.
Oh, it's
and that list is coming pretty soon.
It's going to be published pretty soon, so keep an eye on the Standards website or on our social media feeds. It'll be, you'll be pleasantly and delighted and surprised, I think.
Hooray!
Yay!
So one piece of news this week, I don't know if you saw it, but Just Stop Oil invaded Les Miserables in the middle of the show. I read a really fun piece by a former writer for me at the stage called Fergus Morgan, who has an excellent Substack, but he talked about how fitting it was that this show, and that scene particularly, just as the actors are about to man the barricades, was for them to charge in at that point. It's hard to protest, really, if you're in the audience, you come to see a show about protest.
There was a piece in the, I think it was certainly out in one of their emails today in the Times, where their critic does not agree with Fergus Morgan. He thinks that the theatre is no place for protest, which I thought was a really, really weird thing to say.
Yeah. Tell that to the 1970s.
Exactly. But his argument was something to do with, it was along the lines of people have paid good money for this, it's not fair. But protest is not convenient. It's not convenient. And I think they finished the show. I realise it means that...
No, it was cancelled and they got refunded.
I mean,
they got their money back, and it is annoying, and obviously people there for a good night, but in the grand scheme of things and the environment crashing around our ears, then maybe it's not the worst in the entire world.
One night of Les Mis lost is...
Yeah, you sort of think, the suffragettes famously inconvenienced people, didn't they?
They did, yeah.
Including artworks, slashing one right through the picture at the National Gallery.
So, that's That's very
and
true.
here no one was hurt. It was just a mild inconvenience, I think.
Yes.
But yes, in a show about revolutions and upending the normal order, I think, good choice.
Well, it's not to be snippy, but actually, having some bit of excitement in Les Mis is actually quite nice.
You've seen it too many times.
Yeah,
I've seen it too many times. I can hear the people sing. Yes, that's true.
Should we get into our first review?
Yep.
Let's
This
do it.
one is Stephen Sondheim's Old Friends.
But, baby, you'll be swell, you'll be great, gotta have the whole world on a plate. Start.
That's Lea Salonga singing Coming Up Roses from Gypsy in a performance which, the night I saw it, I thought would probably send the first three rows deaf and blind. It was so powerful. It's one of many of Sondheim's numbers featured in this musical, which we'll get to it all.
But I haven't seen it yet. You guys have seen it, but I'm desperate to, because it just sounds like a bit of a laugh.
There are more than 40 songs from various musicals.
Yeah, it's about... so Sondheim wrote 15 completed musicals, I think, as composer and lyricist. A few others as just lyricist, and one as just one uncompleted, I think. Not quite got my facts there right, but check Wikipedia, you'll find it out.
Close enough.
Anyway, this is an entertainment arranged by Cameron Mackintosh and sundry other sort of friends of Stephen Sondheim.
It's directed by Matthew Bourne.
It's directed by Matthew Bourne. Julia Mackenzie, who is one of the great sort of British renderers of Sondheim, had some sort of role in
She was co-directing, I think, as well. Yeah.
So it's very, very much focused on the shows that Mackintosh produced of Sondheim over here.
And the majority of tunes you've heard of are all in it.
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, to name but a few companies in there, Sweeney Todd.
I mean, West Side Story, there's Sunday in the Park with George, there's Follies, there's Into the Woods. I mean, anything you can think of, it is there, really.
Rendered by this sort of cream of the crop of both sides of the Atlantic, of people who have been in Sondheim shows and have known Sondheim and go back decades with him in some cases. So
I bet this is selling really well.
I bet
it was full last night when I saw it, and I imagine because it all started. Stephen Sondheim died in 2021, and this sort of outpouring of love for him. They put on a one-off gala, and the scrum for tickets was extraordinary. So they've decided basically to put it on for a couple of months in London. And it is not a piece of theatre in the sense of a dramatic arc of one story, but it was just banger after banger, hit after hit.
It's a greatest hits package, and they are great, and there are a huge number of them. It's
but
just
you've never seen Sweeney Todd, have you?
No.
Did you like Try the Priest? I was yesterday to Nick in the office. I was like, oh my god, it's my favourite.
Try the Priest was superb. And what's great is there are some of the musicals where there's one or two tunes, but there's a couple where they really focus on it. I mean, it is obviously one for the Sondheim fanatics, but as not a non-Sondheim fanatic, and actually someone who came to it quite late, I found it a really, really exhilarating evening in the theatre. I mean, I've got to say, I've always been nervous of Sondheim. I came quite late to musicals, and I love them now, but it took me a while. Yeah. But Sondheim, I always felt sort of that was the real musical theatre, aficionados.
I've always thought of Sondheim as being the easiest one to get into if you don't like musicals, though, because so many people say they don't like musicals because they're a bit like, hands, why are these people singing? And it's but whereas with Sondheim, the words are so clever.
It's very intelligent. It's very acid. It's very knowing and urban.
It's very urbane.
Yeah.
And I always assumed it would just be so much easier.
But it's probably not quite as hooky as some of those ones you were thinking of. I think you have to work a little bit harder, but it really pays off once you have.
It doesn't give you that easy exuberance that musicals have, of sort of very stark emotions. It's always quite ladled with irony that you stuff in Sondheim, isn't it? But,
it really undercuts a lot of the, and I'm going to use a wanky word here, but tropes and things like that. So if you know about that stuff, you've seen a lot of musicals and you really get into it, it really pings off. So, but actually, as I realised last night, you don't need to know a lot of the stuff at all. I mean, David Benedict wrote an essay in the programme, really excellent essay about Sondheim. But he said essentially his work is, he called it an astonishingly eclectic catalogue of dramatically and musically demanding musicals, none of which can be categorised as easy listening for large but lazy audiences. Yeah. And I think that's what I found. And I read an interview with a lot of the cast, and Lea Salonga, this great Broadway star, being one. And she said she always found Sondheim difficult, which is really interesting. And she said actually as she got older, older, she could access it a lot easier, and I feel probably exactly the same.
I felt a bit like a fanboy here. Bernadette Peters, as we say, Broadway legend, making her West End debut. I mean, blimey.
Do you know how she's 75?
I know she's 75.
I couldn't believe
it.
And she made her stage debut. I looked this up. 1958.
Wow.
And she's here in 2023, knocking it out the park.
She looks incredible. I mean, I would say she's not the strongest voice on stage, but it doesn't matter. It's Bernadette freaking Peters. It is extraordinary. That, I think, is a sign of the sort of affection with which Sondheim was held, the loyalty that people felt towards him. Lea Salonga, I remember seeing in the original Miss Saigon here, I think, years ago, and I haven't seen her since. And I had to actually email one of the PR people overnight and say, was that her doing Mrs. Lovett?
Yes, I was thinking the exact same.
Because most of the time she is this sort of very recognisable, the sort of default look here is sort of black suits and black dresses, sort of
very elegant
style stuff, very elegant. But she's unrecognisable as Mrs. Lovett, and she's wonderful at it, and really does a rather passable Cockney accent.
It was only when I saw the photo of it the day after in the interview that I was like, oh my goodness, that was a real transfer. And actually that speaks to how much money and how much kind of care and attention Cameron Mackintosh has put into this production. Amazing sets roll on and roll off, and the choreography by Stephen Mear. I mean, it's really done Sondheim justice, I think.
It really has. And they do also, I mean, it's not just black suits and black dresses. They do, for the Into the Woods section, they put on some sort of fairy tale gear.
Yeah.
There are a few sort of costume nods, so it's it's a really, high production value evening. Also, I don't want it to just be about the Americans, because there's some seriously good Brits in this cast, sort of young and not so young, diplomatically. Bonnie Langford,
my notes afterwards just say, Bonnie Langford, ! It was high kick, doing the splits and then knocking it out the park with a tune afterwards. It was incredible.
She's. I interviewed her once when she was playing Peter Pan in Panto, and she was, sort of middle-aged at that point. And bless her, she brought her own lunch in. I interviewed her in this travel lodge near Lambeth Bridge, and she got this sort of filled bap that she'd brought in with her. And she was. They only rehearsed Panto for like a week, but she was going up. She was saying, "I'm flying this afternoon," so having to get back in a flying harness, after having 2 kids and whatever, blah blah blah. So she's absolutely wonderful in this. She sings "I'm Here" from Follies, which is just absolutely brilliant. I thought the version that was done at the National was pretty unimprovable, but her one here, I think, is almost definitive.
And as you say, there's huge. Janie D, I love in absolutely everything. And here, she brought the house down, and you've got the song list, but a sort of riff on The Girl from Ipanema. And it's
just called The Boy From.
The Boy From, and it brought the house down.
Yes.
I mean, she's got real comic chops, Janie D.
She's very good.
And of course, Joanna Riding, another absolute star.
Love Joanna Riding, absolutely. And there were some new faces that I didn't know. I mean, Jack Yarrow, who is a sort of coming star of musical theatre, who I was aware of. Beatrice Penny Torre, I've never seen on stage before, I don't think, but she holds her own absolutely with these, these veterans and troopers. So it's great. It's a really lovely tribute to a real proper titan of musical theatre.
Absolutely.
That one's a rave.
I mean,
FYI, they really liked it.
We'll
tell you what we really think.
It's one of those that you leave the theatre and you feel absolutely joyous. It flew by. It was 2.5 hours, I mean, with an interval, but it absolutely flew by for me. And it isn't one where you have to, again, feel worried that you don't know all the songs. So it will introduce you to a whole new world, I think. Certainly has with me.
It brought back to me the recent revivals of Company and Follies. Little
wonderful.
Live music. Made me wish that we'd had that Sunday in the Park with Jake Gyllenhaal, which was supposed to happen before. Cameron Mackintosh, if you're listening, it's about time we had another Sweeney Todd, though, I think. It's been a few years since London's had a proper...
Well, wasn't that... there was an amazing one in a pie shop that then went over to New York.
That's right, yes, which I missed down in Tooting. Yes, that was
gutted I missed that.
Yes, I'm gutted I missed that.
Right, let's go to the ads after the break. Nick Curtis is going to be at the Almeida with Alison Oliver for Portia Coughlan.
Hello, I'm Joseph Fiennes, and you're listening to the Evening Standard Theatre Podcast.
With me this week is Alison Oliver, who you will know from her TV role in Conversations with Friends, but also she's lit up various stages over recent years in Dancing at Lunacy at the National, in Women Beware the Devil at the Almeida, and now in Portia Coughlan at the Almeida. Alison, welcome.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks so much for joining us on this. Well, for those of us, I thought I'd seen Portia Coughlan before, and reading it, I realised I actually hadn't. So could you just outline what it's about?
Yeah, so Portia Coughlan is a play by Marina Carr, and it follows a 30-year-old woman called Portia, and the play is set on her 30th birthday. and she is grieving the loss of her twin brother who died 15 years ago. So this kind of anniversary mark is quite significant because she's lived half her life with him and now half her life without him, and she feels huge unrest and guilt about his death, and we're kind of just following her over these couple of days processing that.
Right. Marina Carr writes in a very specific way, a very sort of specific argot. How easy is that to sort of wrap yourself around?
It's so extraordinary to work on, because I think so much of the dialect and the voice and the accent kind of unlocks the characters, I find. They all speak in such a muscular way and such a kind of poetic way as well. I think there's huge poeticism in her language. That is true of the communities that she's writing about. They speak in quite everyday colloquial language, but then within that there's like huge kind of relationship to the natural world and how they speak about, like the river is a huge theme in this play. And Portia has a huge connection to that river, and the kind of poetic language in which she kind of speaks about it in her everyday speech with the people that she interacts with is so kind of stunning. You would know if it's a Marina play if you weren't told. It's really
How
amazing.
close is the accent to your Cork accent?
It'd be quite different, actually. It's rural Offaly, and I'm from Cork, so it's quite flat and kind of drawn out. And she actually has a version of this play that's kind of phonetically written in the language, so we've been looking at that a lot, which has been really helpful.
There seems to be quite a sort of, as you say, the river is very important in the play. There seems to be a real sort of potent connection to the landscape.
Yes.
Almost a mystical one, would that be right, do you think?
Absolutely. I think there's a huge theme in the play about a kind of certain level of transcendence that I think all of the characters are kind of searching for, because they're all living, I think Marina might have, I could be wrong, but I think she described them one day as like they're all mad goblins looking for the light, looking up from the bog, searching for the light or something like that. And there's a kind of a darkness within their community or all of their lives. And so this kind of search for the other, or can they be freed from themselves, or what else is out there, is really vital for all of them. And I think specifically for Portia, what she's been through already in her life is kind of extraordinary. She's been through huge grief and huge trauma. Like, it's been really interesting exploring her psychologically, because I think when someone has been through something so enormous, I think trauma kind of unlocks certain parts of your brain or blocks it out, and so she kind of has access to really deep things and really kind of profound things, and I think you see that her exploring that throughout the play of the other world, or the mystery of where her brother Gabriel lives and what that is, and can she access it.
Yes. You're playing slightly above your age here, aren't you? And
yes.
Portia is a mother of 3 boys as well, isn't she? Whereas
yes.
to now you've tended to play, sort of relatively youthful characters of about or below your own age, haven't you? How's that getting your sort of headspace into Portia?
Yeah, I mean, Carrie Cracknell, our director, has been amazing, and like she has 3 kids herself, and that was something that we really wanted to kind of make feel real, and the kids never appear in the play, but we really want to make them feel like they're there, and they're a big part of her, obviously, of her life. And I think the play is as much about Portia grieving her brother as it is about grieving herself and her own life, because she, 2 years after her brother died, she was kind of really encouraged by her dad into this marriage when she was 17, and then started having kids at 19. So she has kind of grown up at a rapid pace, but not processed a lot of what's happened in her life. And so I think she has these huge responsibilities and expectations on her. But I think she's still almost, a part of her is capped at 15, where she kind of, her life changed drastically. But I think, just really kind of exploring the experience of motherhood, and her specific experience of motherhood has been very important for me to feel very real and immediate throughout the play. So, yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about Dancing at Lunasa? How was that as a show to work on?
Oh my God, that was such an extraordinary experience for me. And, I've known that play since I'm a kid and loved it. I've seen it done so many times. And the cast that Josie Rourke, who directed it, that she brought together, I just felt like was so exciting, because I never worked in the National before, and kind of getting to come and do a play in the Olivier with a full Irish cast. And we had Tom Riley, who played the English Welsh character in it, but it was just so exciting. And I think Brian Friel would probably be my favourite male playwright, and I think there's something particularly about that play, you know, exploring kind of memory or nostalgia, that I found so deeply moving. And it's one of those ones that I think when people came to see, that reminded them of their auntie or their granny, or, you know, I have older sisters, and even though it's set in 1930s, there were so many kind of patterns or themes that reminded me so much of my own life, and it was just a deeply, like, exciting and moving experience.
It's something I think
me.
was very close to his own heart, wasn't it, Brian?
Yeah,
because it was sort of
yeah.
semi-autobiographically about his own sisters and his own family, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah, there's a. I
his
actually
mother's
went
sisters,
to.
sorry, wasn't it?
Yeah. So his I think that it's kind of loosely based on his mother and her sisters, and before we started, I actually went to the Glenties in Donegal to see, because the house is still there that he spent those summers in, and kind of in a weird way, like Portia Coughlan, the relationship to the space and the land and where those things take place, I think you can feel in the play of like the relationship to the environment. And I think Dancing at Lunasa in particular like has this real kind of, I don't know, like nostalgia feeling that even though you weren't there, it feels like you were there or something, the way it's written.
Yeah.
But him having kind of that reference point of an actual, you know, it's not directly, but it's very kind of tied into what he did experience. I think you can really feel that within the language. And
I met him and his lovely wife at the Evening Standard Theatre Awards just towards the end of his life, and I had to actually end up carrying his award around for him, because he was physically a very small man, and he was quite sort of frail at that stage, and those things are heavy. The poor chap couldn't actually lift it up on stage, but he was an utterly charming man.
Yeah.
And I sort of treasure that memory of just talking to him and his missus in the bar afterwards. It was really great.
Oh my God.
I know you can't talk about TV and film projects because of the actors' strike, which we all heartily support here. You've got your start on TV, but you've done quite a lot of theatre since. Is theatre your main focus? Do you like to mix it up? Is there, you know...
Yeah, I think, I mean, like, I came to acting as a kid through theatre, like, you know, like amateur drama. I went to like stage schools and stuff like that in Cork when I was a kid, and just loved the stage so much, and, you know, live theatre. And I graduated college during the pandemic, and so theatre was kind of quiet when I was graduating, and it was something that I always... You know, that's always been my dream, is to be on stage, and then getting to do TV and film. I love that so much, and I think it offers such a different thing. I always kind of see it as kind of, I don't know, it's like different levels or something like that. And I think there's something about being on a stage and getting to, you know, it's as much as what you develop with people in the room, but also I think then the audience, like I think that I find it really informs the performance or how the show goes, and I just find that kind of immediate reaction so thrilling. So I'm delighted to be doing lots of theatre this year, because I really missed it.
Great.
So yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I read that you're based in Dalston now, is that right?
Well, yeah, so I moved to London about, I think it's about a year and a half ago or 2 years, maybe a year and a half ago, and I'm living in Peckham. It's funny, I purely moved there because I was just looking for accommodation, and that's where it came up. But actually a lot of Irish people actually are in South London. It's a big spot for that. But one of my sisters lives in Dalston, and when I did the play here the last time, I stayed with her, and she's very kindly letting me stay with her again for the previews, because it's just so close. So
yes,
I'll be here for the next week.
Are you
or
a
so.
Londoner now, or do you still regard yourself as an Irish woman?
I mean, I'm here all the time, you know, and I always like getting back to Ireland as much as I can. And I know that eventually I will go back to Ireland. I think I have a huge relationship to home. But I think just in terms of work and stuff, it's kind of, this is where I'm basing myself. But I wish I kind of got home more than I do. But yeah,
right.
Hopefully more.
What's the best thing and the worst thing about London?
Oh, God. I mean, I think I'm definitely used to it now. But I remember when I first moved over, I couldn't get over how you had to like allocate an hour to get everywhere. Just because if I was traveling an hour, say like in Cork, you'd be in like the next county or something. Like my brain for ages couldn't really fathom that. But then now I think I'm kind of used to it now. I've gotten into like podcasts and music and all that. So, and my favourite thing is, well, I think it's probably actually the same. It's linked to its kind of expansiveness and how, you know, there's always something going on and there's always something new to see or to do. And luckily a lot of my friends from drama school are over here now and school, and my sisters are here and stuff. So it's a very exciting place to be, I think, in your 20s.
Absolutely, yeah, great.
Yeah.
Terrific. Brilliant. Alison Oliver, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Portia Coughlan is on at the Almeida until September the 18th.
Let's go to the ads. In part 3, we'll be reviewing the Twiggy Musical. In the meantime, why not give us a follow?
Hi, I'm Marisha Wallace, and you're listening to the Evening Standard Theatre Podcast.
Welcome back to the podcast.
You've seen some other stuff this week. You saw something really fun.
Yes, I saw Noises Off, the great Michael Frayn farce. I'd never seen it before, to my absolute shame. And it just builds and builds. It really lived up to all of the hype that I'd heard. It started off as a sort of classic old school English farce, trousers down, doors open, doors shutting.
Nothing on.
Then the second part of it is behind the scenes while this play is going on, and it's further down the tour and things are fraying quite spectacularly. And the third part is at the very final performance, it's the front again and how it's completely fallen apart. And something happened to me that has not happened to me in the theatre for, I would say, several decades, in which I just couldn't stop laughing by the end. I think my wife was sort of looking askance at the sort of guffawing idiot next to her by the end of it. But yeah, I just really, really enjoyed it. And what was lovely, Michael Frayn was there.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
And he came out on stage and sort of, you know, waved to everyone. And there was a genuine love for this great, great British playwright.
He's 90 years old now. And I mean, he's very gracious about this. This has been his greatest hit, and it is bulletproof. You know, he's written all these incredibly intelligent other plays like Copenhagen and you know, wonderful, wonderful stuff. He is the person whose brain I would most like to have. You know, you can argue his merits versus Stoppard or whatever, but I just love his life and the way his mind works. Very gracious about the continued success of this play, because every time it goes on, that's the reaction it gets. I saw this production in its slightly earlier life when it had a slightly different cast, but I had a good time at shooting Hedda Gabler at the Rose Theatre, whose writer and star.
Yeah, you loved that, didn't you?
You interviewed on the podcast. Yeah, it was just really, 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 really interesting. You know, not perfect, but very, very smart. Using Hedda Gabler set on a contemporary film set in Norway to explore things like coercive control. But Antonia Thomas in the lead, I thought was really sort of riveting to watch and really, really interesting. It's very stylish and very cool in a way that theatre sort of rarely is as well. You know, it just looks really, really, really cool. And yeah, I think beautiful job of sort of adapting and updating the story from Nina Siegel.
Now it's time for Close Up, the Twiggy Musical. So this is a show about the life of Lesley Hornby, who was much more famously known as Twiggy as her modelling career took off. Guys, is this show fit for the catwalk?
Oh, mate.
Mate.
I mean,
Getting twiggy with it.
The audience around me loved it. They loved it. They loved it. They loved it. They loved it. As I was walking out, there was an elderly lady, not just one, but this particular elderly lady turned to me and said, "Wasn't it wonderful?" And I didn't really know what to say, because I didn't.
Well, the answer is no.
The answer is, as far as I'm concerned, definitively no.
Yeah.
But I said that I thought that many of the performances were splendid, which I think is true. But as far as I'm concerned, this is a musical that would have been better as a New Yorker profile.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on, Nick.
It's a compilation musical, so it's using sort of apposite songs of the times to sort of illustrate.
What sort of famous ones do we know?
Story. Yeah, I mean, sort of
some,
yeah.
I mean, actually, clearly the audience, right, like, you know, the audience was 100%. Well, on the night I went, the matinee I went, so it makes it even more likely. The audience was 100% white and 99% considerably older than me.
I was going to say, I thought you were 100 years old. I mean,
but they were very, very much older than me, and they did know quite a lot of the songs, especially including the ones I didn't know.
It's a sort of whistle-stop tour of the greatest hits of the early part of her career. It sort of stops rather abruptly around about 1981, I think, doesn't it? So you only get the sort of rise and then the reinvention as a sort of actress and musical theatre performer.
Yeah, and you know what? I didn't know quite a lot of that stuff. And she was clearly very accomplished.
I didn't know about her, how accomplished she was as a designer, that she basically started out making clothes rather than just modelling them. So there is a story to be told here, but it is told not very well. And I think that's because Ben Elton's curse of prolificness, basically. He churns out so much material, novels, stage shows, TV programmes, stand-up tours. I just wonder, how much focus he ever has on any one particular thing. And here, it just feels really, really scanty, really sort of skimpy.
She narrates the whole thing. The whole thing is narrated.
Yeah.
Every single bit of it. It's her telling a story. There's no showing.
Yeah.
It's all addressed directly to the audience. It feels really lazy.
Given it's about Twiggy, I was rather pleased with myself that I described it as pretty thin stuff. But,
Very clever.
But, I sort of sense slightly Elton being at war with himself, that him sort of adoring the whole 60s scene and the whole, and the sort of blokiness of it and the sort of slightly, look at these gorgeous girls, in their miniskirts and stuff like that. But he's also constantly trying to sort of retrofit
he wants a bloody medal.
Putting a sort of
really
feminist
does.
spin on stuff and, showing how Twiggy was sort of gaslit and exploited by boyfriends and managers and the like.
Nowadays, we'd call that toxic masculinity, but in those days, no one really said a word.
Yeah, it's
when,
almost...
things were different then. But this, over and over again. It's just like, I think that's called gaslighting.
Exactly.
Please.
It's almost like you can see Ben Elton putting on one of those big foam fingers that they have in American football games and wagging it at us every 5 minutes or so, but also sort of wagging it at himself because he's maybe getting a bit too sort of into the whole 60s sexism stuff. I mean, Elena Skye plays Twiggy. She's fine, I think. She sings okay.
She's got no energy.
No.
And her movement, she's very listless. For a woman who, I think she won a Golden Globe, Twiggy, didn't she, for one of the films that
was
she
it The
made.
Boyfriend, I think, possibly?
Yeah,
yes,
which had a lot of dancing in it.
Yeah.
And yet, Elena Skye, who plays her, you're never convinced that girl could ever get to the point where she would kind of convince you as someone singing and dancing. And then later on Broadway, where Twiggy got nominated for a Tony.
Yeah.
But it's just, she's just sort of like listlessly waving her arms about and just belting out the song.
Yes.
And like everyone else around her is absolutely hoofing the living hell out of it somehow to make up for the kind of lack of energy, the kind of eye of the storm.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
There's her first boyfriend, Justin de Villeneuve, keeps sort of interrupting the action. This
I actually thought he was really funny.
Yeah, he was quite funny. He's sort of ridiculous. But I mean, her husband and the father of her daughter, who sort of trundles on, Michael Whitney, later on, this sort of...
Played by Darren Day.
This sort of phony cowboy who comes on wearing a sort of leather lounge jacket and an open neck shirt, and you just sort of think, oh God, this is just the songs they fit him out with are just awful, buttock clenchingly embarrassing.
The direction is really basic. And there's so I remember that they gave one song when she's finally leaving him because he's a lovely man who turns out to be a terrible drunk.
Yeah.
And she finally kind of gets up the courage and everything to walk out the door, and he sings this song, but he sort of sings it kind of waving, sort of pointing at the wings where she's left, and you're kind of like, no, you're singing a song, right? So you can do that to us now. Like, you don't have to pretend that you're talking to a woman who left 3 minutes ago. It's really, really strange.
Yeah.
It's like it's just got no imagination to it. Considering the whole thing is directed at the audience, and then he sort of ignores them during his sort of huge number.
Yeah.
I just want to talk very briefly about some of the cast.
Yeah.
Aoife Dunn who plays Leslie's friend, or Twiggy's friend, Cindy, her Irish friend from school, and also Lauren Azania AJ King-Yombo, who plays her mate Kay.
Yeah.
I thought they were both really, really good. They were snappy, they had great comic chops, their timing was good, their singing was good. They just sort of, every time they popped on stage, they lifted the energy a little bit, and I really liked that. And I also thought that Stephen Serlin, with his incredibly strong northern accent for Norman Hornby, who was Twiggy's dad, was very, very moving, actually.
Yes.
Just, he kind of embodied that sort of kindness and sense of fun, and his care for his daughter and his wife, who had these terrible depressions and would be taken away, actually, for long periods of time for electroconvulsive therapy, when essentially what she probably had was postnatal depression after the birth of Twiggy, who was her third daughter. And he kind of stood by her and cared for her. That felt like a really rounded character that had been rounded out by the actor and by his performance, and I thought that was really lovely.
Well, these cast members deserve better. Twiggy deserved better, I think, really. The songs of the 60s and 70s deserved better use than they're put to here, really. It's just a massive missed opportunity.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, although I have to say there was one number that has been stuck in my head for the days since, and I saw this about half a week ago, which was a rewriting of and I don't know what the name of the song is, but it's that one that goes, "Right said Fred, time to do the,"
It's
whatever.
Called Right Said Fred. It's a Bernard Cribbins one
and
originally,
and the two elder daughters and the dad, while the mum is away having to look after baby Lesley, they do a remade version of that about the fact that the baby can't stop shitting. They can't keep on top of it, and it's actually really funny. So I really enjoyed that. But other than that, I was just a bit like, oh, God, am I still here?
If listeners take away one thing from a podcast that has been glorying in the musicianship of Stephen Sondheim, I really hope it is not about a song Right Said Fred about a baby shitting.
It's a very important now.
It's such. I feel. I don't want this to be a character assassination. I mean, I've I know people who know Ben Elton who speak incredibly highly of him. I've interviewed him a couple of times, and I think he is a good thing. I just wish sometimes he would rein it in a bit. Be a bit more subtle, spend a bit more time on things. Rather than just banging things out one after the other. Because I think this is the result, really.
I think there could be just a lot more showing and a lot less telling.
Yes.
What actually turned out to be quite an interesting story was sort of lost.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for this week's episode of the Evening Standard Theatre Podcast.
Check out all our other episodes below, which include guests such as Joseph Fiennes, Antonia Thomas, Sir Ian McKellen and Roger Allam, and many, many more.
Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss us. Thanks to our producer Rachel Abbott, and we'll see you next Sunday.